Welcome to Forgotten Myths. Get comfortable. Adjust your pillow. Dim the lights if you haven't already. Tonight, we're traveling to the land of the Nile, Egypt, a civilization that lasted for 3,000 years, longer than Rome, longer than Greece, longer than almost any culture in human history. They built monuments that still stand today. The pyramids of Giza, the temples of Karnak, the tombs in the Valley of the Kings. Structures so massive, so precise, so enduring that people still wonder how they were built. They created art that still takes our breath away, paintings that look fresh after 4,000 years, sculptures that capture the human form with impossible grace, jewelry so delicate it seems too fragile to have survived. They developed systems of writing, of medicine, of mathematics, of astronomy that influenced everything that came after. The Greeks learned from them. The Romans learned from them. We're still learning from them. But more than anything else, the Egyptians thought about death. They were obsessed with it, not in a morbid way, not because they feared it more than other cultures, not because they were depressed or nihilistic or grim. The opposite. They were obsessed with death because they believed they had figured it out. While other civilizations saw death as an ending, as a descent into shadow and silence, as a loss of everything that made life meaningful, the Egyptians saw it as a journey, a test, a transformation. Die correctly, and you could live forever, in paradise, in the field of reeds, a place of green fields and cool water and eternal sunlight, a place where you would be reunited with everyone you had ever loved, a place where pain and sickness and aging didn't exist. Die incorrectly, and you would be erased, not punished forever, not tortured for eternity, not consigned to some burning hell where demons would torment you for your sins, simply gone, as if you had never existed at all. The stakes could not be higher. And the gods who controlled this process were not gentle shepherds guiding their flock to safety. They were judges, examiners, beings of immense power who would weigh your entire life, every action, every word, every thought, and decide in a single moment whether you deserved to continue existing. Tonight, we're telling their stories. Osiris, the god who was murdered by his own brother, cut into 14 pieces, scattered across Egypt, and who rose to become the king of the dead, the judge of souls, the hope of everyone who ever lived and died in the land of the Nile. Anubis, the jackal-headed god who was abandoned at birth and became the guardian of the dead, who invented mummification, who guided souls through the darkness of the underworld, who weighed hearts against the feather of truth and the judgment itself, the hall of two truths, the 42 gods, the negative confession, the scale that determined everything, and the monster who waited to devour those who failed. These are the original myths, the stories that Egyptians told for 3,000 years, before they were simplified for museums, before they were sanitized for documentaries, before they were reduced to hieroglyphics on gift shop souvenirs. The real stories of Egyptian death. Let's begin. To understand Osiris, we need to go back to the beginning. Not the beginning of Egypt, not the beginning of humanity, the beginning of everything. In the Egyptian view, before creation, there was only one thing, none, the primordial waters. Imagine an infinite ocean. No light, no land, no life, no up or down, no before or after, just endless, formless, dark water stretching forever in every direction. None wasn't evil, none wasn't good. None wasn't even really a being, not in any way we would understand. None was simply the default, the state of existence before existence began, the nothing that preceded something, and none still exists. That's the strange part. The Egyptians didn't believe that none was destroyed or replaced by creation. They believed that none still surrounded everything, that the created world was like a bubble floating in an infinite sea of primordial chaos. That if the proper order wasn't maintained, none would come rushing back in and dissolve everything. This is why Ma'at, order, truth, justice, was so important. It wasn't just a nice idea. It was the force that held reality together. Without Ma'at, Nun would reclaim everything, but we're getting ahead of ourselves. In the beginning, there was none, and within none, something stirred, a consciousness, a will, a desire to exist, the first thought in an infinite mindlessness. The Egyptians called this first being by many names, depending on which city you asked. Each major city had its own creation myth, its own first god, its own version of how everything began. In Heliopolis, the city of the sun, they called him Atum. Atum means the complete one or the finisher. He was everything and nothing. He contained within himself all the potential of creation waiting to be expressed. In Memphis, the ancient capital, they called the first god Ptah. Ptah was a craftsman god. He created by speaking words and thinking thoughts. The world was his workshop, and he shaped it with divine intention. Thebes, the great religious center, they called him Amun. Amun means the hidden one. He was invisible, mysterious, present everywhere but seen nowhere, the breath of life itself. But the story, in its essence, was similar everywhere. This first god willed himself into existence. He rose from none like a lotus flower, rising from dark water. He stood on the first mound of solid earth, the Benben, the primordial hill, the first dry land in an infinite sea. And then he created more. In Heliopolis, they told it this way. Atum was alone, completely, utterly alone, the only conscious being in existence. He contained within himself both male and female principles, both the power to create and the substance to create from. And so he created from himself. In some versions, Atum sneezed and coughed. From his breath came the first divine children. In other versions, and this is important, because the Egyptians weren't embarrassed by it, Atum created through masturbation. He took his own seed and from it generated the next generation of gods. This wasn't obscene to the Egyptians. It was sacred. It was the purest form of creation, bringing forth life from yourself alone, without needing another, without dependency or partnership, the ultimate act of self-sufficient power. The word they used was nehep, to create by the hand of God. From Atum's creative act came two beings, Shu, the god of air, of the breath of life, of the space between things, and Tefnut, the goddess of moisture, of rain and dew, of the waters that make life possible, air and moisture, the first pair, the first division of the undivided. Shu and Tefnut were twins, but also lovers. From their union came the next generation, Geb, the god of the earth, the ground beneath your feet, the foundation of everything solid, and Nut, the goddess of the sky, the vault of heaven. The stars themselves were decorations on her body, and the sun and moon traveled across her. Geb and Nut loved each other. They loved each other so much that they were locked in an eternal embrace. The earth and the sky pressed together with no space between them. But this was a problem. There was no room for anything else, no space for life, no gap between ground and heaven where creatures could exist. So Shu, their father, the god of air, separated them. He lifted Nut up and held her above Geb. He became the atmosphere, the space between earth and sky. And in that space, life could finally exist. But Nut was pregnant. She was carrying children. And now, separated from Geb, held up by her father, she needed to give birth. Ra, the sun god, who had emerged from Atum's line and become the ruler of the gods, grew angry. There are different versions of why. Some say Ra was jealous of potential rivals. Some say he had received a prophecy that one of Nut's children would surpass him. Some say he simply wanted to assert his authority over the other gods. Whatever the reason, Ra made a decree. Nut could not give birth on any day of the year. The Egyptian calendar had 360 days, and on none of them, not a single one, could Nut bring forth her children. It seemed like an unbreakable curse. The children would remain unborn forever. The next generation of gods would never exist. But Thoth, the god of wisdom, found a loophole. Thoth was clever, the cleverest being in existence, some said. He was the god of writing, of knowledge, of magic, of the moon. He invented hieroglyphics. He recorded the judgments of the dead. He knew secrets that even Ra didn't know, and he knew how to gamble. Thoth challenged Khonsu, another moon god, to a game of Senet. Senet was the most popular board game in ancient Egypt, a game of strategy and luck, played on a grid of 30 squares. The stakes were unusual. If Thoth won, Khonsu would give him some of his moonlight, a portion of his luminescence, a fraction of his power. They played, and Thoth won, again and again and again. By the end, Thoth had won enough moonlight to create 5 extra days. 5 days that existed outside of Ra's decree. 5 days that weren't part of the 360-day calendar. The Egyptians called these the epigomenal days, the days outside of time, the days between years. And on those 5 days, Nut gave birth. The first day, Osiris was born, the firstborn son, the heir to everything. When he emerged into existence, a voice echoed across the cosmos. Some say it was Ra's voice, acknowledging what he had failed to prevent. Some say it was the voice of creation itself. The Lord of all things is born. Osiris came into the world marked for greatness. The second day, Horus the Elder was born. This is confusing because there would later be another Horus, the son of Osiris and Isis. Egyptian mythology is full of these doublings and contradictions. Different eras and different cities told different stories, and the priests never fully reconciled them. Horus the Elder was associated with the sky, with kingship, with the falcon that soared above everything. The third day, Set was born. But Set didn't wait to be born naturally. He didn't emerge through the normal process. He tore himself from his mother's side. He ripped through Nut's body, forcing his way out before his time, because he couldn't wait, because he refused to follow the rules, because he was chaos and violence from his very first moment. This was the omen of everything to come. The fourth day, Isis was born, the great goddess, the mistress of magic. The throne of Egypt itself, her name, Aset, meant throne, and the hieroglyph for her name was literally a throne symbol. She was beautiful, she was brilliant, she was powerful in ways that even the other gods didn't fully understand. The fifth day, Nephthys was born, the lady of the house, the shadow sister. She was associated with death and mourning, with the edges of things, with what lies just out of sight. These 5 were the generation that would rule the world. Osiris and Isis became a pair, husband and wife, king and queen. Set and Nephthys became a pair, though it was never a happy match, and the stage was set for the greatest drama in Egyptian mythology. Osiris was everything a god should be. The texts describe him in terms of perfection. He was tall and well-formed. His face was noble, his bearing regal. He radiated authority without being harsh, power without being cruel. His skin was green. This might seem strange to us, but to the Egyptians, green was the color of life, the color of vegetation, the color of the fertile banks of the Nile after the annual flood receded and crops could be planted. Green meant renewal, growth, the promise that death was not the end. Osiris's green skin was a visual promise. He was life itself in divine form. When the time came, Geb, the earth god, Osiris's father, passed the kingship to him. Osiris became the first divine pharaoh, the ruler of the world, and he was magnificent at it. Before Osiris, the myths say humanity was savage. Humans had been created. There are several versions of how, including one where they emerged from the tears of Ra. But they had no culture, no civilization, no understanding of how to live. They were like animals. They hunted and gathered. They fought over food and territory. They killed each other without reason. They had no law, no justice, no concept of right and wrong. They were barely surviving. Osiris changed everything. He didn't conquer humanity. He didn't enslave them or force them into submission. He taught them. He traveled the length of Egypt, from the delta in the north to the cataracts in the south, from the fertile valley to the edges of the desert. Everywhere people lived, Osiris went, and everywhere he went, he brought knowledge. First, he taught them agriculture. This was revolutionary. The Nile flooded every year. For months, the river would swell, overflowing its banks, covering the land with water. When the flood receded, it left behind a layer of rich, dark silt, the most fertile soil in the world. But before Osiris, humans didn't know how to use it. Osiris taught them to plant seeds in that dark earth, to wait for the crops to grow, to harvest the grain when it was ripe, to store it for the months when nothing grew. He taught them to dig irrigation channels, to control the water, to bring the Nile's blessing to fields that the flood didn't reach. He taught them to read the stars, to know when the flood was coming, to prepare for the season of growth and the season of harvest and the season of waiting. Agriculture meant stability. It meant surplus. It meant that not everyone had to spend every moment searching for food. Some people could specialize. Some people could become craftsmen, priests, artists, builders. Civilization became possible. Second, he taught them to make bread. This might seem like a small thing, but bread was the foundation of Egyptian life. Grain could be stored, but it couldn't be eaten raw. Osiris taught them to grind it into flour, to mix it with water, to let it ferment, to bake it in ovens. Bread was nutrition. Bread was portable. Bread was something you could give to workers, to soldiers, to travelers. Bread was currency before currency existed, and fermentation led to something else. Third, he taught them to brew beer. Again, this might seem like a minor thing, a luxury, an indulgence. But in ancient Egypt, beer was essential. The Nile's water wasn't always safe to drink. It carried diseases. It could make you sick. But beer? The fermentation process killed harmful organisms. Beer was safer than water. Beer was nutrition. It contained vitamins and calories. Beer was medicine. Workers were paid in bread and beer. The pyramids were built by men who received beer rations. Offerings to the gods included beer. Festivals celebrated with beer. Osiris gave them this. Fourth, he taught them law. Before Osiris, disputes were settled by violence. The stronger person won. The weaker person lost. There was no concept of justice, of rights, of fair treatment. Osiris introduced Ma'at. Ma'at was more than law, it was cosmic order. The principle that the universe operated according to rules, and that humans should operate according to rules too. Ma'at meant truth. It meant justice. It meant balance. It meant doing what was right, not just what was expedient. Osiris established courts. He appointed judges. He created systems for resolving disputes without bloodshed. He taught that the strong had obligations to the weak, that rulers had duties to their subjects, that everyone, from the highest to the lowest, was bound by the same cosmic order. Fifth, he taught them religion. Before Osiris, humans didn't know how to worship. They sensed that greater powers existed, but they didn't understand how to approach them, how to honor them, how to ask for their blessing and avoid their wrath. Osiris taught them to build temples. Sacred spaces where the gods could dwell, where humans could come to offer prayers and sacrifices. He taught them rituals, the proper ways to approach the divine, the words to say, the offerings to make, the festivals to celebrate. He taught them that death was not the end, that there was something beyond, that the way you lived your life mattered, not just in this world, but in the next. He gave them hope. Under Osiris, Egypt flourished. The crops grew tall. The storehouses were full. The people were fed and clothed and housed. Crime decreased. Conflict decreased. For the first time in human history, people could plan for the future instead of merely surviving the present. Egypt became a paradise. But Osiris wasn't content with just Egypt. Osiris looked beyond Egypt's borders. He saw other peoples living in the same savage state that Egyptians had once lived in, hunting and gathering, fighting and dying, no agriculture, no law, no hope. And he decided to help them too. This wasn't conquest. Osiris didn't raise armies. He didn't march across borders with weapons and soldiers. He didn't subjugate foreign peoples or demand tribute. He traveled. He taught. He demonstrated. He brought the same gifts he had given Egypt: agriculture, brewing, law, religion, civilization. And wherever he went, people listened, not because he forced them, because what he offered was so obviously better than what they had, because he approached them with kindness rather than violence, because he showed them a way of life that was more prosperous, more stable, more meaningful than anything they had known. Osiris traveled for years. Some myths say he went as far as Greece, as far as India, as far as the edges of the known world. Everywhere he went, he planted the seeds of civilization, and everywhere he went, people remembered him with gratitude and love. Meanwhile, in Egypt, someone else was ruling: Isis, Osiris's sister, his wife, his queen. When Osiris left on his civilizing mission, he didn't leave Egypt without leadership. He left it in the most capable hands possible. Isis was his equal, perhaps his superior in some ways. She was a goddess of magic, the most powerful magician in existence. She knew spells that could heal the sick, that could raise the dead, that could compel the gods themselves to do her bidding. And she proved it in one of the most famous stories in Egyptian mythology. Ra, the sun god, was the king of the gods, the most powerful being in existence. He rode across the sky every day in his solar boat, bringing light to the world. But Ra had a secret name. In Egyptian magic, names held power. To know something's true name was to have power over it. The gods had public names, Ra, Osiris, Isis, Set. But they also had secret names, hidden names, names that contained their true essence. Ra's secret name was the source of his power. Whoever knew it could command him, could control him, could potentially become more powerful than him. Ra had never told anyone his secret name. He guarded it more carefully than anything else. Isis wanted it. Not for malicious reasons, not to destroy Ra or usurp his throne, but because knowledge was power, and Isis was a being who hungered for power, for capability, for the ability to protect herself and those she loved. So she devised a plan. Ra was old. This is strange to think about, a god being old. But the Egyptians imagined Ra aging throughout each day. He was young in the morning, mature at noon, and elderly by evening. And over the eons, he had accumulated age in a more permanent way. Old Ra drooled. Isis collected his saliva. She mixed it with earth. And from this mixture, she fashioned a serpent. Not an ordinary serpent. A divine serpent, made from the substance of Ra himself. A creature that partook of Ra's own essence. She placed this serpent on the path that Ra walked each day. And she waited. Ra came walking, the serpent struck. It bit Ra. And because the serpent was made from Ra's own substance, Ra couldn't heal himself. The venom burned through him. He screamed in agony. He called out for help. All the gods came running. They tried everything, every spell, every remedy, every power they possessed. Nothing worked. Ra was dying, and then Isis appeared. "I can help you," she said. "I know the words that will cure you, but I need something in return." "Anything," Ra gasped. "Name your price, your secret name." Ra's eyes widened. Even in his agony, even facing death, he hesitated. His secret name was his ultimate protection, his final power. To give it away was to make himself vulnerable in ways he had never been vulnerable before. "I am the maker of heaven and earth," Ra said. "I am the maker of the hours. I am the opener of the two horizons. I am Khepri in the morning, Ra at noon, Atum in the evening." "Those are not your secret name," Isis said calmly. The venom continues to burn. Ra tried again. He listed more titles, more names, more descriptions of his power and majesty. None of them were the secret name. And Isis knew it. The pain grew worse. Ra felt himself fading. Death, even for a god, was approaching. Finally, in desperation, Ra pulled Isis close. He whispered into her ear the secret name, the true name, the word that contained his essence. Isis spoke the spell. The venom withdrew. Ra was healed, but Isis now possessed knowledge that made her one of the most powerful beings in existence. She could command Ra himself. She had leverage over the king of the gods. This was the kind of being who ruled Egypt in Osiris's absence, clever, patient, willing to play the long game, willing to do whatever was necessary to protect herself and those she loved. Set should have been afraid of her, but Set was too consumed by his own envy to think clearly. Set watched Osiris receive glory. He watched his brother travel the world, spreading civilization, earning the gratitude of every nation he visited. He watched Isis rule Egypt in Osiris's absence, and he watched the people love her almost as much as they loved her husband. He watched and he burned. Set was not like Osiris. Where Osiris was handsome, Set was strange. His appearance disturbed people. The Set animal, whatever it was unlike any creature in nature. It suggested something wrong, something that didn't fit, something that shouldn't exist. Where Osiris brought order, Set embodied chaos. He was the god of storms, of violence, of the desert. The harsh parts of existence, the things that destroyed rather than created. Where Osiris was loved, Set was feared. People worshipped him, yes. They made offerings to him, but they did so out of fear, hoping to appease him, hoping he would direct his violence elsewhere. Osiris got the throne, the beautiful wife, the adoration of gods and humans alike. Set got the wasteland. And there were rumors, whispers that Nephthys, Set's wife, had gone to Osiris, that she had disguised herself as Isis, that she had seduced him, that she had borne a child from that union. Whether it was true or not, Set believed it. His brother hadn't just taken the throne, hadn't just taken the love of the world. He had taken Set's wife. The jealousy curdled into hatred. The hatred curdled into something colder, more deliberate, more dangerous. A plan. Set was patient. He didn't strike immediately. He didn't challenge Osiris openly. He knew that in direct confrontation, he would probably lose. Osiris was beloved. Osiris had allies. Osiris had Isis. Set needed to be clever. He gathered conspirators. 72 of them, according to the myths. Some were gods who envied Osiris. Some were demons who served chaos. Some were simply beings who owed Set favors, or who feared him too much to refuse. They met in secret. They plotted. And Set watched Osiris. He studied his brother carefully. He noted his habits, his preferences, his weaknesses, and he took his measurements. Exactly how tall Osiris was, exactly how broad his shoulders were, the precise dimensions of his body. Set commissioned a chest to be built. It was beautiful, the most magnificent chest anyone had ever seen, crafted from the finest wood, cedar from Lebanon, ebony from Nubia, inlaid with gold and silver and lapis lazuli, carved with intricate designs showing scenes of the gods and the afterlife. A masterwork, a treasure, something any king would covet. But its interior was built to one specific size, Osiris's size. Set waited until Osiris returned from his travels. The king was tired, happy, proud of what he had accomplished abroad, ready to resume his rule in Egypt, to see his wife, to enjoy the peace he had created. Set threw a feast in his honor, a great banquet, the finest food Egypt could offer, the best beer, music and dancing and entertainment, a celebration of Osiris's return. All the important gods were invited. All of Set's conspirators were present, and Osiris, unsuspecting, walked right into the trap. The evening progressed. The drinks flowed. Everyone relaxed. Even Isis, if she was there at all. Some versions say she was absent, called away by some ruse, didn't sense the danger. Osiris was among family, among friends. What could possibly go wrong? At the height of the celebration, Set had the chest brought in. Servants carried it into the banquet hall. They set it down where everyone could see it. The gold inlay caught the lamplight. The precious stones glittered. "Look at this beautiful thing," Set announced. "I had it made by the finest craftsmen in all of Egypt. Have you ever seen anything so magnificent?" The guests murmured appreciation. It was indeed spectacular. "And I've decided to give it away," Set continued. "As a gift, a game. Whoever fits inside it perfectly, whoever matches its dimensions exactly, can keep it." Laughter, a party game, entertainment for a festive evening. The guests lined up to try. One by one, they climbed into the Iwa Bei chest. Too tall, too short, too wide, too narrow, no one fit. Set watched each attempt with apparent amusement, but his eyes kept sliding to Osiris, waiting. Finally, Osiris's turn came. "Brother," Set said warmly, "won't you try?" Osiris had no reason to suspect anything. This was a party, a game. His brother seemed genuinely friendly, more friendly than he had been in years. Osiris climbed into the chest, and of course it fit perfectly, every inch, every angle, his shoulders against the sides, his head against the end, his feet against the other end, as if it had been made for him, because it had. The moment Osiris lay down, everything changed. Set shouted a command. His conspirators rushed forward. They slammed the lid shut before Osiris could react. They nailed it closed. They sealed every crack with molten lead. They made certain that no air could get in or out. Inside the chest, Osiris understood too late. He pounded on the lid. He screamed. He used all his divine strength to try to break free, but the chest held, the seal held, and Osiris couldn't breathe. He suffocated, the Lord of all things, the bringer of civilization, the beloved king. He died in a box at his own brother's party. Set had murdered the king. Set seized the throne. He declared himself pharaoh. He was the only adult male of the royal line now. Who could challenge him? But he still had a problem, the body. As long as Osiris's body existed, there was a chance. Isis was the greatest magician in existence. She had forced Ra himself to surrender his secret name. If she got access to Osiris's body, who knew what she might be able to do? She might bring him back. She might restore him. She might undo everything Set had accomplished. So Set took the chest. He carried it to the Nile, and he threw it into the river. The current caught it. The chest floated north, toward the delta, toward the Mediterranean Sea, away from Egypt, away from Isis, away from anyone who might find it. Set thought that was the end of it. He returned to the palace. He sat on the throne. He began his reign. He had no idea what was coming. When Isis learned what had happened, something inside her crystallized. Not broke, crystallized. She didn't collapse in grief. She didn't surrender to despair. She didn't beg Set for mercy or accept the new reality. She transformed. She cut off her hair, a sign of deepest mourning in Egypt. She tore her fine linen garments. She covered herself in dust and ashes. She put on the roughest clothes she could find, and she walked out of the palace, out of the city, out of Egypt, into the unknown. She would find Osiris. She would find the chest. She would find a way to make things right, no matter how long it took. The search lasted years. Isis had no map, no guide, no idea where the Nile might have carried the chest. The Mediterranean was vast. The shores stretched for thousands of miles in every direction. She wandered. She walked along rivers. She followed coastlines. She asked everyone she met, "Have you seen a magnificent chest, decorated with gold and precious stones, floating in the water, washed up on shore?" Most people knew nothing. Many were afraid to speak. News traveled, and everyone knew that Set was now king of Egypt. Helping Isis was treason, but she kept searching. She questioned fishermen, merchants, sailors, farmers, anyone who might have seen something. Years passed. Her feet bled. Her clothes wore out. She ate whatever she could find. She slept wherever she could. And she never gave up. Finally, in a distant land, she heard a story. Fishermen in the city of Byblos, in what is now Lebanon, spoke of something strange. A magnificent chest had washed ashore on their coast. Before anyone could examine it closely, before anyone could open it, a tree had begun to grow around it. An erica tree, a heather tree. It grew with supernatural speed. Within days, it had completely encased the chest in its trunk. The tree continued to grow. It became the largest, most beautiful tree anyone had ever seen. Its wood was fragrant. Its shape was perfect. So perfect that the king of Byblos ordered it cut down. He used it as a pillar in his palace. The chest and Osiris's body were inside that pillar. Isis traveled to Byblos. She could have stormed the palace. She was a goddess. She had power that could level cities. But that wasn't her way. Isis was subtle, patient. She understood that the cleverest approach was rarely the most direct one. She disguised herself as an ordinary woman, a stranger in a strange land. She found a place to sit by the seashore where the queen's handmaidens came to bathe. When they arrived, she befriended them. She was charming, kind, helpful. She braided their hair in intricate Egyptian styles they had never seen before, and she breathed on them. Her divine breath carried a fragrance, not perfume, something deeper, something that clung to them, that became part of them. When the handmaidens returned to the palace, the queen noticed immediately. "What is that smell?" she demanded. "Where did you get it?" They told her about the mysterious woman by the shore. The queen summoned Isis. She was impressed by this stranger, by her beauty, her grace, her manner. She offered her a position in the palace, as nursemaid to her infant son. Isis accepted. Every night, when the palace was asleep, Isis performed a ritual. She would take the baby prince, she would light a magical fire, and she would place the child in the flames. This wasn't cruelty. The flames wouldn't burn him. They would purify him. They would burn away his mortality, layer by layer, night by night. Eventually, he would become immortal, a god. It was the greatest gift Isis could give. While the baby lay in the fire, Isis would transform herself. She became a swallow, a small bird. She flew around and around the pillar that held Osiris's body, crying, mourning, keeping vigil, night after night. But one night, the queen couldn't sleep. Perhaps she had a nightmare. Perhaps she heard a strange sound. Perhaps some instinct drew her to her son's room. She opened the door. She saw her baby lying in flames. She screamed. She lunged forward. She grabbed her son out of the fire, and in doing so, she interrupted the ritual. The process was broken. Her son would live, but he would live as a mortal. He would age. He would die. The immortality that was almost his was lost forever. Isis revealed herself. The swallow transformed. The ordinary nursemaid became a goddess of terrible beauty and power. Her divine radiance filled the room. The queen fell to her knees. "I meant your son no harm," Isis said. "I was giving him eternal life. You have taken that from him? Forgive me," the queen begged. "I didn't understand. I didn't know." "There is one thing you can give me in return," Isis said. "One thing that will repay this debt. Anything? Name it." "The pillar." The king and queen gave Isis the pillar immediately. She cut it open with divine power. The wood split. The fragrant heartwood parted. Inside was the chest, still sealed with lead, untouched by time or decay. Isis opened it, and there was Osiris, her husband, her brother, her king. He was perfectly preserved. The lead seal had kept out water, air, decay. He looked as if he were merely sleeping. His green skin was still vibrant. His features were still noble. But he was cold, and he was dead. Isis collapsed over the body. She wept. Her tears were divine. They carried power. They carried grief deeper than any mortal could feel. The myths say that those tears were the origin of the Nile's annual flood. Every year, when the river swelled, it was echoing Isis's sorrow. Every year, the flood brought fertility and life, just as Isis's grief would eventually bring Osiris back in a new form. She wept for hours, days. She had searched for so long, hoped for so long, and now she held her husband's body, and he was gone. But Isis was not a goddess who surrendered. She dried her tears. She wrapped Osiris's body carefully in linen. She chartered a ship. She would bring him home to Egypt, and she would find a way. Isis hid Osiris's body in the marshes of the Nile Delta, the papyrus swamps, where the water was shallow and the reeds grew thick and tall, where the ground was soft and wet and difficult to navigate, where Set's soldiers rarely went. She needed time to prepare, time to gather the magical components she would need, time to devise a spell powerful enough to bring a god back from death. She left the body hidden and went to work. But Set had spies everywhere. Perhaps one of his conspirators lived in the delta. Perhaps a local reported seeing strange activity in the marshes. Perhaps Set simply got lucky. Whatever the reason, Set found out. He went hunting. He found the hiding place. He found the chest. He found his brother's body. And this time, Set would make absolutely certain that Osiris could never return. He tore open the chest. He dragged out the corpse. And he did something beyond murder. Something designed to destroy not just a body, but any hope of resurrection. He cut Osiris into pieces, 14 pieces. The myths are specific about this number, 14 for the 14 days of the waning moon, or 14 for the 14 cubits of the Nile's annual flood, or 14 because that's how many districts Set's most loyal followers controlled. The number had meaning. Each piece was separated, the head from the neck, the arms from the shoulders, the legs from the hips, the torso divided, the organs scattered. Set didn't just kill Osiris, he atomized him. And then he distributed the pieces across all of Egypt. He threw some into the Nile. He buried others in distant deserts. He gave some to his conspirators to hide in their own territories. The head was sent to one place, the legs to another, the spine to a third. Set scattered his brother across the entire kingdom. Let Isis try to resurrect that. When Isis discovered what had happened, her grief transformed into something fiercer. She had searched once. She had found him once. She would do it again. But this time, she wasn't alone. Nephthys came to her. Nephthys, who was Set's wife. Nephthys, who perhaps loved Osiris. Nephthys, who had been silent and compliant throughout Set's reign. She came to her sister in the marshes and she said, "I will help you." It was treason. It was betrayal of her husband. It was dangerous beyond measure. And Nephthys did it anyway. Because some bonds are stronger than marriage. The two sisters traveled the length of Egypt. They walked hundreds of miles. They crossed deserts. They forded rivers. They climbed mountains. They searched every marsh, every oasis, every canyon, every cave. They questioned everyone they met. They used magic to divine locations. They followed rumors and whispers and half-remembered stories. And wherever they found a piece of Osiris, they built a shrine. The head was found near Abydos in Upper Egypt. They built a temple there. It became the holiest site in all of Egypt, where pilgrims would travel for 3,000 years to honor the god. The backbone was found at Busiris in the Delta, another temple, another sacred place. The legs, the arms, the pieces of the torso, scattered across the two lands. Each one recovered, each one sanctified. This is why Osiris was worshipped in so many places across Egypt. Each location claimed to hold a part of his body. Each temple was built on the site where Isis and Nephthys had wept and prayed and recovered a piece of their beloved. They found 13 pieces. But the 14th? Osiris's phallus had been thrown into the Nile, and a fish had eaten it, an oxyrhynchus fish, a type of fish common in the Nile, recognizable by its distinctive pointed snout. The piece was gone, digested, destroyed. It could not be recovered. This is why the oxyrhynchus fish was sacred in Egypt, and also forbidden to eat. It had consumed part of a god. It was both holy and taboo. Touching it was dangerous. Eating it was unthinkable. But Isis needed all 14 pieces to resurrect Osiris. Without the complete body, the magic wouldn't work. So she made a new one. Isis crafted a replacement phallus out of gold. Some versions say clay. Some say wax or wood. But gold is the most common telling. Gold, which doesn't tarnish. Gold, which lasts forever. Gold, which was considered the flesh of the gods. She fashioned it carefully. She blessed it with spells. She made it as divine as the original. Then she assembled the body. 13 original pieces, 1 golden replacement. She laid them out in the correct positions. She bound them together with magic and linen. And she performed the first mummification. Not Anubis, not yet. In this version of the myth, it was Isis who invented the process. Isis who figured out how to preserve a body for eternity. Isis who spoke the first embalming spells. She washed the body with sacred water. She anointed it with oils and resins. She wrapped it in layer after layer of linen, each layer consecrated with words of power. She placed amulets among the wrappings, the scarab over the heart, the Djed pillar for stability, the eye of Horus for protection. She worked for hours, days, weeks, and when she was finished, Osiris was preserved, not alive, not breathing, but preserved. His body would not decay. His form would remain intact for eternity, and his soul would have somewhere to return. But Isis wanted more than preservation. She wanted her husband back, even if only for a moment, even if only long enough to... She transformed herself into a kite, a bird of prey. She spread her wings over Osiris's mummified body. She beat them, creating a wind that carried life force, that stirred the air, that moved the boundary between life and death. She called out in the voice of a falcon, cries of longing, cries of power, cries that reached into the realm of the dead and pulled. And for a moment, just a moment, something stirred. Osiris wasn't truly alive. He could never be truly alive again. But something of his essence remained. Something responded to Isis's call. And in that moment, Isis conceived. She became pregnant with a child, with Horus, the son who would avenge his father, the son who would reclaim the throne, the son who would battle Set for 80 years and finally restore Ma'at to Egypt. Osiris couldn't stay in the world of the living. He had died, He had been dismembered, even reassembled, even mummified. He was no longer what he had been. The threshold had been crossed. There was no true return, but he wasn't nothing. He descended to the underworld, to the Duat, the realm beneath the earth. And there he transformed. Just as seeds buried in the earth become plants, Osiris buried in death became something new. He became the king of the dead. He sat on a throne in the Hall of Two Truths. His skin was green, still the color of life, of vegetation, of renewal. He wore the white crown of Upper Egypt, with the Atef crown's ostrich feathers on either side. He held the crook and flail of kingship crossed over his chest. And he judged. Every person who died would eventually stand before Osiris. He would look at them with eyes that had seen death from the inside. He had experienced everything they were experiencing. He had been murdered, dismembered, destroyed, and he had survived it. He had become something new. He offered that possibility to everyone who came before him. Pass the judgment, and you too could be transformed. You too could live eternally. You too could be reborn. Fail the judgment, and oblivion. Osiris understood both outcomes. He had faced them himself, and he judged fairly, without cruelty, without favoritism. The God who had taught humanity civilization now taught them something even more important: how to survive death. But the story doesn't end with Osiris's transformation. Isis was still alive, still in the world of the living, still pregnant with Horus, and Set knew. If Isis bore a son, that son would have a claim to the throne. That son would grow up seeking vengeance. That son would be a threat to everything Set had built. Set hunted for her. He sent soldiers through the delta. He posted guards at every road. He offered rewards for information. He threatened punishments for anyone who helped her. Isis fled deep into the papyrus marshes, the place where she had hidden Osiris's body, the place where the reeds grew so thick that an army couldn't penetrate. There, alone except for a few loyal followers, she gave birth to Horus, a divine child born in exile, a future king raised in hiding. Isis raised Horus in secret. She protected him from every danger: scorpions, snakes, crocodiles. The marshes were full of creatures that could kill a child. She used her magic to ward them off. She slept with one eye open. She never left him alone. And she taught him. She told him about Osiris, about what Set had done, about the throne that was rightfully his, about the vengeance he would need to take. She prepared him. For years, Horus grew in the marshes. He became strong, he became skilled, he became angry, and when he was ready, he emerged. The war between Horus and Set lasted 80 years, 8 decades of battles, tricks, contests, appeals to the divine tribunal. It was the longest, most brutal conflict in Egyptian mythology. Horus would attack Set. Set would counterattack. They would fight to a standstill. They transformed into animals to battle each other. Horus as a falcon, Set as a hippopotamus. They fought in the sky and under the water and on the land. In one famous battle, Set tore out Horus's eye. The eye of Horus, which would become one of the most important symbols in Egyptian religion. Set ripped it from his nephew's head and cut it into pieces. 6 pieces, like the 6 pieces of a certain fraction. Thoth, the god of wisdom, recovered the pieces and reassembled them. He healed Horus. He restored the eye. In retaliation, Horus ripped off Set's testicles. He castrated his uncle, the god of chaos, rendered sterile. Back and forth, blow for blow, mutilation for mutilation. Neither could definitively defeat the other. Finally, the gods convened a tribunal. This had been tried before, multiple times. But the gods couldn't agree. Some favored Set. He was older. He was more experienced. He had actually been holding the throne for 80 years. He had defended Egypt's borders. He fought Apophis every night, protecting Ra himself. Some favored Horus. He was Osiris's son. He was the legitimate heir. His cause was just. Ma'at demanded that he rule. The debate went on for years within the tribunal. Speeches were made. Evidence was presented. Arguments went in circles. At one point, they wrote to Neith, the ancient goddess of war and hunting and wisdom. She was older than almost any of them. Perhaps she could decide. Her response was blunt. Give the throne to Horus. Give Set double his property as compensation. And if you don't do as I say, I will become angry, and the sky will fall upon the earth. Even then, some gods resisted. The debates continued. Finally, someone suggested consulting Osiris himself. A letter was sent to the underworld, to the king of the dead. Osiris's response was even more direct than Neith's. Why is my son being defrauded? He wrote. I am the one who made you strong. I am the one who created the grain that sustains you. And I have at my command the messengers who fear no God. If I send them, they will bring back the heart of whoever does wrong. Everyone comes to me eventually. Gods, humans, everyone. You will all stand before me in the end. Remember that when you make your decision. It was a threat, a reminder. Osiris might be in the underworld, but the underworld is where everyone ends up. The tribunal ruled in Horus's favor. Horus became king of Egypt. He ascended to the throne that had been his father's. He wore the double crown. He restored Ma'at. Set wasn't destroyed. He was given dominion over the desert, over storms, over chaos. In some versions, he and Horus reconciled. They are depicted together, binding the two lands of Egypt. But in the essential story, justice was done. The son avenged the father. The usurper was removed. The rightful king took his place. And this pattern, father and son, death and succession, Osiris and Horus, would repeat for 3,000 years. Every pharaoh was Horus in life. Every pharaoh became Osiris in death. The cycle continued until Egypt itself faded away. This was Osiris, the god who brought civilization, the god who was betrayed and murdered, the god who was dismembered and scattered, the god who was reassembled and transformed, the god who showed that death was not the end. If Osiris could survive what was done to him, murder, dismemberment, the complete destruction of his body, then maybe death could be survived by anyone. That was his gift to Egypt. Hope. Osiris ruled the underworld. He sat on his throne in the Hall of Two Truths, waiting to judge the souls of the dead. But he didn't do this alone. There was another god, a darker figure, a jackal-headed being who lurked at the edges of death. Anubis. The Egyptians called him Inpu or Anpu. The Greeks translated this as Anubis, and that's the name that stuck. He was the lord of the sacred land, the one who is upon his mountain, the foremost of the Westerners. He invented mummification. He guided souls through the darkness. He weighed hearts against the feather of truth. He was there for every death that ever happened in Egypt. But his own beginning was anything but glorious. Anubis was the son of a secret affair. Nephthys was married to Set, but she didn't love Set. How could she? Set was chaos and violence and destruction. He had murdered Osiris. He had seized the throne through treachery. He ruled through fear. Nephthys had watched her husband do terrible things. She had remained silent. She had remained compliant, but she didn't love him. She loved Osiris. And one night, when the opportunity arose, she acted on that love. She disguised herself as Isis. She came to Osiris in the night. In the darkness, he didn't realize the deception. He thought his wife had come to him, and Nephthys conceived a child. When she realized what had happened, Nephthys was terrified. If Set found out, he would kill the child. He would probably kill her too. His jealousy of Osiris was already a consuming fire. Discovering that his own wife had betrayed him with his brother would push him over the edge. So when the baby was born, Nephthys made a terrible decision. She abandoned him. She took the infant to the edge of the desert, to the marshes where the cultivated land gave way to wasteland, and she left him there, among the reeds, among the jackals, left to die. But Isis found him. Isis, who was always searching. Isis, who had spent years looking for Osiris. Isis, whose magical senses could detect things that others couldn't. She heard a baby crying in the marshes. She followed the sound. She found the child, tiny, vulnerable, exposed to the elements. And she recognized him. She could see Osiris in his features. She could sense the divine blood. She knew immediately that this was her husband's son. It didn't matter that the mother was her sister. It didn't matter that the child was a product of deception. Isis took him in. She raised him as her own. She nursed him. She protected him. She taught him. She named him Anubis. What does it do to a person, even a divine person, to be abandoned at birth? The myths don't explore this directly. Egyptian theology wasn't psychology. They weren't interested in trauma and its effects. But we can imagine. Anubis grew up knowing that his mother had left him to die, knowing that his existence was an accident, a mistake, something that had to be hidden, knowing that he didn't quite fit in the divine family. He wasn't Osiris and Isis's true child. That would be Horus, born later. Horus was the heir, the avenger, the one who mattered. Anubis was something else, the illegitimate son, the hidden child, the one who existed in the margins. Maybe that's why he became what he became, the god of the margins, the god of the threshold, the god of the space between life and death. He found his place in the in-between. When Set murdered Osiris, when the body was found, when the pieces were gathered, someone had to figure out what to do. A body cannot last. Without intervention, it decays, it rots, it returns to the earth. And for the Egyptians, this was a problem. They believed that the soul needed a body. The Ba, the personality, the self, had to have somewhere to return. The Ka, the life force, had to have something to sustain it. If the body was destroyed, the soul was homeless. Eternal life became impossible. Isis had reassembled Osiris. She had performed magic to temporarily restore some spark of him, but she couldn't make the body last forever. Someone had to solve that problem. Anubis stepped forward. He looked at his father's body. He looked at the problem, and he invented mummification, not all at once. The process evolved over centuries of Egyptian history, but in the mythology, Anubis was the source, the first one to figure it out. He washed the body with sacred water from the Nile. He purified it, removing all earthly contamination. He removed the organs that would decay. The brain, extracted through the nose with specialized hooks. The liver, lungs, stomach, intestines, removed through an incision in the side. The brain was discarded. The Egyptians didn't understand its function. They thought it was just packing material for the skull, but the other organs were preserved, washed in natron, dried, wrapped in linen, and placed in canopic jars. 4 jars, 4 organs, 4 protecting gods. Anubis left the heart in place. This was crucial. The heart was the seat of the soul, the center of consciousness, the thing that would be weighed in the judgment. Without the heart, the deceased couldn't be judged. Without judgment, they couldn't enter the afterlife. So the heart stayed, protected by a special amulet, the heart scarab, inscribed with a spell. O my heart, which I had from my mother, do not stand up against me as a witness. A plea to your own heart not to betray you when the moment of truth came. Anubis packed the body cavity with natron. Natron was a naturally occurring salt found in dried lake beds in the Egyptian desert. It absorbed moisture. It preserved. The body was buried in natron for 40 days. 40 days. The same period when Sirius, the dog star, disappeared from the sky each year. A time of absence. A time of transformation. During those 40 days, the moisture was drawn out. The body became dry, leathery, shrunken, no longer capable of decay. After 40 days, the natron was removed. The body was washed again. The cavity was stuffed with linen and sawdust and spices to restore its shape. Then came the wrapping, hundreds of yards of linen, strip after strip, wound around every part of the body. The arms were wrapped separately, then together with the torso. The legs were wrapped separately, then together. The head was wrapped. Between the layers, Anubis placed amulets, the scarab over the heart, the Djed pillar, representing Osiris's spine, for stability, the jet, the knot of Isis, for protection, the eye of Horus, for healing. Dozens of amulets, each with its own purpose, each adding another layer of magical protection. The wrapping took days. It was a ritual as much as a physical process. Every layer was blessed. Every amulet was consecrated. And when it was done, Osiris was preserved, not alive, but present. A vessel for his soul to return to, a home base for eternity. The process Anubis invented was refined over centuries. By the New Kingdom period, around 1500 BCE, mummification had become an elaborate science. The entire process took 70 days, 40 for the drying, 30 for the wrapping and rituals. Specialized priests performed each step. The controller of the mysteries oversaw the whole process. The lector priest read the sacred spells. The wet one washed the body. The bandager did the wrapping. And the chief embalmer wore a jackal mask. He was playing the role of Anubis, speaking with Anubis's voice, acting with Anubis's hands. For 70 days, the deceased was in Anubis's care. The god himself was preparing them for eternity. But Anubis didn't just prepare bodies for the afterlife. He also guided souls through it. When an Egyptian died, their soul, their ba, separated from their body. They found themselves in darkness, the entrance to the Duat, the underworld, and they had no idea where to go. The Duat was not a simple place. It was a vast, complex, dangerous landscape, rivers of fire, gates guarded by demons, paths that led to oblivion. A soul wandering alone would be lost forever. They needed a guide. They needed Anubis. The Egyptians believed that at the moment of death, Anubis appeared. He was there at the bedside. He was there when the last breath left the body. He was there when the soul separated from the flesh, and he took them by the hand. Come with me. I know the way. He led them out of the world of the living, through the boundary between worlds, into the darkness of the Duat. And he didn't abandon them there. He walked with them, past the gates and their demonic guardians, past the lakes of fire, past the serpents and crocodiles and monsters. He knew all the passwords, all the names, all the secrets. The soul only had to follow. Why would a god do this? Walk with every single soul through the underworld, billions of souls, over thousands of years, the same journey, over and over. Maybe because he knew what it was like to be alone. He had been abandoned, left to die. He had faced the void by himself. And he had decided that no one else ever would. The abandoned child became the ultimate guide. The one who was left alone made sure that no soul ever faced the darkness alone again. Why a jackal? This is one of the most common questions about Anubis. Why was the god of death depicted as a jackal, or a man with a jackal's head? The answer is practical. In Egypt, jackals were associated with death because they were scavengers. They hung around cemeteries. They dug up graves. They ate corpses. To most cultures, this would make them horrible. Desecrators. Things to be feared and driven away. But the Egyptians thought differently. They saw the jackals prowling at the edges of the necropolis, and they thought, these creatures are always near the dead. They must understand death. They must have power over it. And they thought, better to make the jackal our friend than our enemy. So they worshipped it. The scavenger became a god. The grave robber became a guardian. The creature that ate the dead became the protector of the dead. This is very Egyptian thinking. They didn't reject the dark parts of existence. They incorporated them. They made even death work for them. Anubis's color was black, not because black meant death or evil or darkness. The opposite. Black was the color of the fertile soil, the rich, dark earth that the Nile left behind after its annual flood. The soil that made crops grow. That made life possible. Black meant renewal, resurrection, life from death. When Anubis was depicted with black skin, it was a promise. You will go into the ground. You will be buried in darkness, but you will rise again, like seeds in the dark earth, like Egypt after the flood. One of Anubis's most important roles came at the climax of the journey through the Duat, the judgment. When a soul finally reached the Hall of Two Truths, when they stood before Osiris and the 42 gods, their worthiness had to be determined. And the method was simple. Their heart was weighed against a feather. Anubis operated the scale. He took the heart of the deceased, the Ibi, the seat of consciousness, memory, identity. He placed it on one side of the great scale. On the other side was a single feather, the feather of Ma'at, the goddess of truth and justice. And everyone watched, Osiris on his throne, Isis and Nephthys beside him, the 42 gods lining the walls, Thoth with his pen ready to record the verdict, and Ammit, the devourer, crouched beside the scale, waiting. If the heart was light, if the person had lived a good life, had followed Ma'at, had been just and honest, the scale would balance. Anubis would announce, the heart is true. Thoth would record the verdict. The soul would be welcomed into paradise. But if the heart was heavy, weighed down by lies, cruelty, injustice, the scale would tip. Anubis would step back, and Ammit would lunge. Ammit was not a goddess. She was a demon, a monster, a thing that existed for one purpose only: to devour the unworthy. She had the head of a crocodile, the most feared predator in the Nile. She had the front body of a lion, the most powerful hunter on land. She had the rear body of a hippopotamus, the most dangerous animal in Egypt. 3 nightmares combined. She crouched beside the scale. Her crocodile jaws hung open, her lion claws twitched, and when a heart was heavy, she ate it. If Amit devoured your heart, that was the end. Not eternal torment, not punishment forever. Oblivion. Without your heart, you couldn't exist. Your Ka had nothing to sustain it. Your Ba had nothing to return to. You dissolved. The Egyptians called this the second death, the true death, the death from which there was no return. This was worse than any hell. At least in hell, you still exist. Amit offered nothing. Anubis watched all of this. He conducted the weighing. He announced the results. He saw souls welcomed into paradise. He saw souls devoured by Amit. And he did his job faithfully, not cruelly, not with pleasure, not with judgment of his own. He simply ensured that the process worked, that every soul received a fair weighing, that the scale was accurate, that the verdict was true, the abandoned child, ensuring that everyone else received the judgment they deserved. This was Anubis, the jackal god, the inventor of mummification, the guide through darkness, the weigher of hearts, not a king like Osiris, not a hero like Horus, a worker, a guardian, a presence at the threshold. He was there when you were buried. He was there when you traveled through darkness. He was there when your fate was decided. And if you were worthy, he was there when you entered eternity. The black jackal with the golden eyes, waiting for you. The moment an Egyptian died, everything they had known ended. Their body lay still. Their family began to weep. The embalmers were summoned. But for the person themselves, for their consciousness, something else was happening. The Egyptians believed that a human being was made of multiple parts. Not just body and soul, the way later cultures would imagine. Multiple spiritual components, each with its own nature and needs. Understanding these parts is essential to understanding what happened after death. The Khat was the physical body, the corpse, the flesh and bone and blood. Without proper preservation, the Khat would decay, and if it decayed, the other parts had nowhere to anchor. This was why mummification was so important. This was why the Egyptians spent enormous resources on preserving their dead. The Khat was the foundation. Without it, everything else collapsed. The Ka was the life force, the vital energy that distinguished the living from the dead. The Ka was created at the moment of birth. The Egyptians believed that the god Khnum, a potter god, shaped each person on a divine potter's wheel. And while he shaped the Khat, the body, he also shaped the Ka, a perfect double, an identical twin made of spirit. Throughout life, the Ka stayed with you. It was your vitality, your energy, your spark. After death, the Ka needed to be sustained. It needed food and drink. This was why offerings were left in tombs, bread and beer and meat. The Ka would consume the spiritual essence of these offerings. If no offerings were left, the Ka would starve. And if the Ka died, the person died completely. The Ba was the personality, your unique self, your memories, your character, everything that made you different from everyone else. The Ba was depicted as a bird with a human head. After death, it could fly. It could leave the tomb during the day, could visit the places you had loved in life, could see the living world again, but it always had to return to the body at night. It needed the cot as a home base. This is why tomb chapels had small holes or slots near the ceiling, so the ba could fly in and out. The ib was the heart, not just the physical organ, but the seat of consciousness. Your thoughts, your emotions, your moral sense. The Egyptians didn't understand the brain. They thought the heart was where thinking happened, where feeling happened, where you were truly located. This was why the heart was never removed during mummification. It was too important. And this was why the heart was weighed in the judgment. The heart contained everything about you. If your heart was heavy with wrongdoing, it would show. The shiyut was the shadow, a dark reflection that followed you through life. Shadows were mysterious to the ancient Egyptians. They were connected to you, but also separate. They mimicked your movements, but had no substance. The shiyut was considered a part of your being. If it was damaged or destroyed, you were diminished. The Ren was your name. As long as your name was spoken, as long as it was written somewhere, some part of you continued to exist. This was why names were carved on tomb walls, why cartouches were preserved, why pharaohs built monuments covered with their names. And this was why enemies would sometimes erase names. They weren't just destroying the person's reputation. They were destroying a part of their very being, erasing them from existence. The Ak was what you became if you passed the judgment. A blessed spirit, a transformed being, light instead of shadow. The Ak was the goal. Everything else was just getting you there. If you successfully navigated the underworld, if you passed the weighing of the heart, if you were welcomed into the field of reeds, you became Ak, and you lived forever. At the moment of death, the Ba separated from the body. Your personality, yourself, lifted away from the flesh, and you found yourself in darkness, not the darkness of night, the darkness of the earth, the darkness of the grave. This was the Duat, the underworld, the realm of the dead. The Duat was not a simple place. Modern people sometimes imagine the afterlife as a single location, heaven or hell, paradise or punishment. The Egyptian afterlife was far more complex. The Duat was a geography, a landscape as complex as the world of the living, but stranger, more dangerous, filled with things that didn't exist in the upper world. Rivers flowed through it, but they might be rivers of fire, or rivers of poison, or rivers that flowed backwards against all natural law. Gates blocked the way, dozens of them, each guarded by demons who demanded passwords before allowing anyone to pass. Monsters lurked in the darkness, serpents, crocodiles, creatures with no names. The Duat was a labyrinth, an obstacle course, a test, and you had to navigate it alone, or almost alone. Anubis would guide you, the spells in your tomb would help you, but in the end, the journey was yours. The Book of the Dead was your survival manual. It wasn't actually a single book. It was a collection of spells, nearly 200 of them, accumulated over centuries. Different people had different collections. Wealthy Egyptians could afford extensive copies with beautiful illustrations containing every spell they might need. Poorer Egyptians made do with shorter versions, containing only the most essential texts. The spells were written on papyrus scrolls and placed in the coffin, or written on the coffin itself, or painted on the walls of the tomb, or inscribed on amulets tucked into the mummy's wrappings. Each spell served a purpose. Some spells were passwords. The gates of the Duat were guarded. The demons who watched them wouldn't let just anyone through. "Who are you?" they would demand. "What is the name of this gate? What is the name of the guardian? What are the secret words?" If you knew the answers, you passed. If you didn't, you were stuck, trapped at that gate, forever, unable to continue your journey. The Book of the Dead contained the answers, the names of the gates, the names of the demons, the passwords that would grant passage. Memorize them before you die, or bring a copy with you. Some spells were protections. The Duat was full of dangers, fire, serpents, hostile spirits. The spells provided defenses. Spell for not being bitten by a snake in the underworld. Spell for not being burned. Spell for repelling the crocodile. Spell for driving away the demon who would snatch your heart. Each spell was a shield against a specific threat. Some spells were transformations. The Egyptians believed that in the afterlife, you could change shape. Spell for becoming a falcon. Spell for becoming a lotus flower. Spell for becoming a divine being. If you needed to fly over an obstacle, you could become a falcon. If you needed to cross water, you could become a crocodile. If you needed to escape a demon, you could become something it couldn't catch. The spells gave you options. Some spells were affirmations. Most important of all was the negative confession, the declaration of innocence that you would speak before the 42 judges. The Book of the Dead contained the words, the denials of sin, the names of the gods you would address. Without these words, you couldn't make your case. You couldn't demonstrate your worthiness. The judgment would go against you by default. The journey through the Duat was divided into 12 hours. Each hour corresponded to a different region. Each region had its own challenges. Let me walk you through them. The first hour. The sun has just set. You find yourself at the entrance to the underworld. Before you is a gate, the first of many. A demon guards it. It demands your name. It demands the name of the gate. It demands the secret words. You speak them. The Book of the Dead has prepared you. The gate opens. You pass through. The second hour. You enter a region of water. Rivers crisscross the landscape. The blessed dead are here. Those who passed the judgment in ages past. They work in the fields, harvesting grain that grows forever. This is a preview of what awaits you. If you are worthy, but you can't stay. The journey continues. The hours pass. The third hour. The waters deepen. You are traveling through the realm of Osiris now. The God of the Dead is aware of you. He watches from his throne in the Hall of Two Truths. He knows you're coming. Not yet. Not the judgment yet. But soon. The fourth hour. The landscape changes. The water gives way to sand. This is the desert of the dead. The wasteland region. The place where nothing grows. Serpents hide in the sand. Demons lurk behind rocks. Every step is dangerous. You speak the protective spells. You invoke the names of the gods who guard travelers. You survive. You continue. The fifth hour. You enter the realm of Sokar. Sokar was an ancient god, older than Osiris, a falcon-headed deity of the deep, earth of the darkest places. His realm is completely black. No light penetrates here, not even the light of Ra's boat, which travels through the Duat each night. You can see nothing. You can only feel your way forward. This is the nadir, the lowest point, the deepest darkness. If your faith wavers, you are lost. The sixth hour, the middle of the night, the exact center of the journey. Ra's boat approaches a great serpent, Apophis, the embodiment of chaos, the enemy of existence, the serpent who tries to destroy the sun every single night. The battle is joined. Ra's defenders fight. Set himself, the murderer of Osiris, is one of Ra's champions against Apophis. Chaos against chaos. The only one violent enough to face the serpent. You watch from the boat. You witness the cosmic struggle. And Apophis is driven back, wounded, not destroyed. Apophis can never be destroyed, but defeated for tonight. The journey continues. The 7th hour, you see punishment. The enemies of Osiris, the followers of chaos, those who rejected Ma'at. They are being tormented, demons with knives, pits of fire, endless suffering. This is what happens to those who fail. You hurry past. The 8th hour, fire-breathing serpents guard the path. You speak the cooling spells. You invoke the names of power. The flames part. You pass through. The 9th hour. The gods who row Ra's boat are exhausted. Even divine beings struggle against the darkness. But the first hints of light appear. The eastern horizon is no longer completely black. The end is approaching. The 10th hour. The light grows. The darkness thins. The demons make one last attempt to stop you, to drag you back, to prevent you from completing the journey. You resist. You fight. You speak the final spells. The 11th hour. The enemies of Ra launch their final assault. Everything that opposes existence makes one last effort. The battle is fierce. The boat rocks. The outcome seems uncertain. And then, the 12th hour. The sun rises. Ra emerges from the Duat. Dawn breaks over Egypt. And you emerge with him, transformed. No longer a dead person struggling through darkness. You are Ak, a blessed spirit, a being of light. But wait, there's still the judgment. Somewhere in the journey, the texts place it at different points. You reach the Hall of Two Truths. Ma'ati, the place of double Ma'at, the place where everything is decided. The hall is vast. Columns stretch into shadow overhead. The floor is polished stone. The walls are painted with scenes of judgment. 42 gods stand in rows along the walls. Each represents a different district of Egypt. Each embodies a different virtue. At the far end, on a great throne, sits Osiris, green-skinned, white-crowned, holding the crook and flail, the king of the dead. Beside him stand Isis and Nephthys, the faithful sisters. In front of him is the scale, and beside the scale stands Anubis, and crouching behind Anubis, Amit, waiting. You approach the throne. Everything has led to this moment, every action of your life, every choice. But before the weighing, you must speak. You must make the negative confession. You turn to face the 42 gods. One by one, you address them by name, and to each, you deny a specific sin. O far strider who came forth from Heliopolis, I have done no falsehood. O fire embracer who came forth from Karaha, I have not robbed. O nosy who came forth from Hermopolis, I have not been rapacious. O swallower of shades who came forth from the cavern, I have not stolen. 42 gods, 42 denials. I have not killed. I have not stolen. I have not lied. I have not been angry without reason. I have not caused weeping. I have not been neglectful. I have not polluted the Nile. I have not cursed the king. I have not blasphemed the gods. The list is comprehensive. Every possible transgression. Every way a human could violate Ma'at. And you deny them all. But here's the thing. Everyone had done something wrong. Everyone had lied at least once. Everyone had been angry without reason at least once. The negative confession wasn't about perfection. It was about alignment. By reciting the denials, you demonstrated that you understood Ma'at, that you knew what a good life looked like, that you recognized right from wrong. You were aligning yourself with justice. You were saying, I know what I should have been. I tried. Judge me on the arc of my life, not its worst moments. The confession is finished. Anubis steps forward. He takes your heart, the Ib, the seat of your being. He places it on the scale. On the other side, he places the feather of Ma'at, and the scale moves. If your heart is light, the scale balances. Anubis announces, the heart of your name is true. They have spoken Ma'at. They have lived in Ma'at. Thoth records the verdict in his eternal book. Osiris speaks from his throne. Let them be given bread and beer from the offerings of Osiris. Let them enter the field of reeds. Let them live among the blessed dead. You have passed. Horus himself may take your hand. He leads you through the final gates, into the sunlight of eternal paradise. But if your heart is heavy, the scale tips. Anubis steps back, and Ammit surges forward. Her crocodile jaws close on your heart. She devours it, and you cease. No more consciousness, no more memory, no more self. The second death, true oblivion, as if you had never existed, but assume you passed. Assume your heart was light. What happens next? The field of reeds? Aru? Paradise? It was a perfect version of Egypt, the Egypt everyone wished they lived in. The Nile flowed through it, but it never flooded too much or too little. The water was always fresh, always cool, always pure. The crops grew tall, wheat and barley and flax, but you didn't have to work them, unless you wanted to. Shabti figures, servant statues placed in your tomb, would do the labor for you. The weather was always pleasant. The sun shone but didn't burn. The breeze blew but didn't chill. Your house was there, built exactly the way you wanted, filled with the things you loved. Your family was there, those who had died before you, those who would die after. You could eat, drink, make love, hunt, fish, forever. No more pain, no more sickness, no more death. Eternity. This was what the Egyptians worked toward their entire lives. They built tombs, they paid for mummification, they memorized spells, they made offerings to the gods. All for this, the chance to live forever in a perfect world. What does Egyptian religion tell us about how they saw the world? First, they believed in justice, not arbitrary divine whim, not faith alone determining your fate. Your life actually mattered. Your actions had consequences. How you treated other people counted. The wealthy couldn't buy their way in. The powerful couldn't force their way in. The eloquent couldn't talk their way in. Your heart would be weighed, and the scale was honest. Second, they believed in preparation. Death wasn't something that happened to you. It was something you prepared for. You built tombs. You paid for mummification. You memorized spells. You made offerings. You didn't hope for the afterlife. You worked for it. Third, they believed in transformation. Death wasn't an ending. It was a change. You died, but you didn't cease to exist. You became something new. A blessed spirit. A being of light. The caterpillar becoming a butterfly. The seed becoming a tree. Death was a doorway. For 3,000 years, Egyptians lived with these beliefs. They built pyramids. They created mummies. They developed a technology of death that has never been matched. They took the most universal human fear, the fear of oblivion, and they answered it. Not with vague promises, not with faith alone, with a system, a process, a way through. They looked into the darkness and mapped it. These were the Egyptian gods of death. Osiris, who was murdered by his brother, cut into 14 pieces and became king of the underworld, who showed that death could be survived, that even complete destruction could be transformed into something new. Anubis, who was abandoned at birth and became the guardian of the dead, who invented mummification, who guided souls through darkness, who weighed hearts with perfect fairness, and the judgment itself, the 42 gods, the negative confession, the scale, the feather, the devourer. The Egyptians didn't fear death. They prepared for it. They understood that the darkness was coming for everyone, that no wealth or power could stop it, that pharaoh and peasant would both stand before Osiris. And they decided to be ready. They studied the maps of the underworld. They memorized the spells. They built tombs that would last forever. They preserved their bodies with the technology Anubis had invented. They treated death as a problem to be solved. And in their way, they solved it. We've traveled now through 3 mythologies: the Greeks, with their monstrous gods and powerless mortals, where death was random and the gods were cruel, and the best you could hope for was to avoid divine attention. The Norse, with their doomed gods and inevitable apocalypse, where everyone knew how it would end, but faced it with defiance. Where even the gods would die, but they would die fighting. The Egyptians, with their cosmic bureaucracy and earned eternity. Where death was a test, where your life was measured, where immortality was possible for anyone who lived well and prepared properly. Each culture looked at death and saw something different. The Greeks saw caprice, the Norse saw fate, the Egyptians saw judgment. None of them were wrong. Death is all of these things. It's random. Some people die young for no reason. It's inevitable. No matter what we do, we all reach the same end. It's a judgment. How we lived matters to us, to those we leave behind. The old myths understood this. They sat with death in ways we've forgotten. They told stories that made the darkness meaningful. There are more stories to tell. Japanese spirits who cling to the world of the living, Celtic warriors who journey to the other world, Mesopotamian gods who descend to realms of dust and silence. The old myths are waiting. They've been waiting for thousands of years. They'll be here whenever you're ready. Until next time, sleep well, and may your heart be light.